This is St Andrews in the very photogenic East Neuk of Fife. It's famous for being the home of golf and for that scene in Chariots of Fire, but there's a bit more to it than that.
This is St Andrew, patron saint of Scotland in St Peter's Basilica in Rome, with a friendly Catholic schoolteacher I used for scale. And this is a more stylised St Andrew's cross, or a saltire, on the national flag of Scotland. But why the diagonal cross? Why is there a town in Scotland named after Andrew? And how did he become our patron saint?
Welcome to Scotland Unplugged, and the story of a battle, a bone-burgling bishop, and our national flag.
St Andrew was born around the year 5 AD. He was one of the first 4 disciples, along with his brother St Peter, who is widely regarded as the first pope. After being recruited by Jesus and hanging up his fishing nets, Andrew spent his life travelling the world, and he covered some ground. He's also patron saint of Greece, Russia, Romania, Ukraine and Barbados. We can't be sure, but the story goes that he was martyred in the city of Patron in Greece in 60 AD, and tradition has it that he was bound to a diagonal cross, a crux de cassata, at his own request, because he didn't believe he was worthy of dying in the same way as Jesus.
This is St Andrews Cathedral, or what's left of it. It was ransacked in the mid-16th century as part of the Scottish Reformation, and then the locals helped themselves to the stone, which is why you get some fantastic architecture around here, but not so much cathedral. But it's still quite something to see. It took around 100 years to build, and it was completed in 1318, a busy time in the life of this country. There are a few variations on how it came to be here. And this is kind of the point where legend overtakes documented fact for a while, but bear with me, we'll get back on track, I promise. The Pictish king, Hungus I, is said to have founded a monastery here in the 8th century, after St Regulus, also known as St Rule, brought some of St Andrew's bones here in the year 345. Regulus might have been a monk, or he might have been the Bishop of Patras, or he might never have existed. We'll never know. One night, in a dream, an angel told Regulus that the Emperor Constantine wanted to take the bones to Constantinople. Constantinople was then the capital of Byzantium, the Eastern Roman Empire, and named after Constantine, so you can see why he might want to fill it full of stuff, like his own personal museum.
The angel told Regulus to take the bones and sail to the western edge of the known world, which in those days, in Roman terms, was here.
Regulus was either shipwrecked down there on the rocks or told to weigh anchor by the angel. And I say he brought the bones here, that kind of implies he turned up with a full skeleton. It was really an upper arm bone, a kneecap, 3 fingers and a tooth, a kind of bony mix and match. Then, in one version, he met Hungus I, which is awkward because it leaves us with a 400-year gap.
The problem is that Hungus was a Pict, and they weren't known for their literary skills. They left us with some epic stonework and some very intricate jewellery, but the only real accounts we have of them come from either earlier Roman sources who describe them as naked, painted warriors, or later historians like the Venerable Bede, who chronicled the life of St Columba but had a skewed view of the world because he didn't get out much. That's not to say the Picts didn't do writing, but if they did, it's long gone. They don't call them the Dark Ages for nothing.
So the story goes that Hungus, or Angus, formed the monastery and the town and cathedral grew up around it. Just over there, poking up behind me, is St Rule's Tower. It dates back to the 11th century and stands 33 metres tall and overlooks the cathedral and the town. Sometimes you can climb it, not today, thank God. Regulus is one story, but there is another, simpler, less exciting version that kind of fits the timeline, and that's that St Acca, the Bishop of Hexham, brought the relics here in the year 732 after picking them up on a Roman tour. But how did we get from here to the flag?
This is Athelstaneford in East Lothian, and this is the Scottish Flag Centre. 100 years after Hungus I, we meet Hungus II on the eve of a decisive battle.
The story goes that the Picts were fighting an army of Northumbrians led by Athelstan here in the year 832. Outnumbered and considering his options, Hungus was visited by St Andrew in a dream. The saint told him not to worry. The cross of Christ would be carried before him by an angel, and all would be well.
During the battle, the Picts saw a white diagonal cross against the deep blue sky. The Northumbrians were defeated, and Athelstan ended his days in the river where the village is now. Hence the name Athelstaneford.
It's a good story, but again, even the very basic historical elements are a bit sketchy. During the Wars of Independence, in the late 13th and early 14th century, Edward I of England, aka Edward the Longshanks, very deliberately destroyed a lot of the written records.
Around the time he took the Stone of Destiny, if he got the right one.
Either way, if you want to subjugate a country, taking away its history is a pretty good start. The earliest version we have of this story was recorded by Walter Bauer in the magnificently titled Scotta Chronicon in the 1400s.
So a mere 600 years after any battle. In that version though, there's no mention of a cross in the sky. That detail emerged much later in written history. In fact, not for another 200 years.
The flag as we know it was first recorded in the year 1512, although there have been changes since then.
So why is St Andrew the patron saint of Scotland? After all, we have quite a few of them to choose from. St Margaret, St Columba, St Ninian, St Mungo, but none of them are quite as heavyweight as St Andrew, an original disciple, and that's kind of the point.
A lot of it probably has to do with timing. During the Wars of Independence, in the year 1299, Pope Boniface VIII signed a papal bull in support of Scotland, condemning Edward's invasion. It's been suggested that a key part of the campaign to make him do that would have been St Andrew, and the fact we had his bones.
By then, because of St Andrew's relics and the mythology and the church that built up around them, this place had become the epicentre of the Scottish church, and that differentiated it from the English church.
St Andrews Cathedral was consecrated in 1318. That was just 4 years after the Battle of Bannockburn. Robert the Bruce would have been here, and would probably have given thanks to St Andrew for his victory. In 1320, the Declaration of Arbroath asserted Scotland's independence and proclaimed St Andrew patron saint. This was in a time when not everyone could read, and whatever the documented history, the oral tradition would have been strong, passed down the generations, becoming more fantastical with every retelling.
And whether St Regulus or St Rule or either of the Hunguses did what the stories said they did, or even existed, wasn't a question for the people who made the Saltire their national flag.
This was a world full of stories told round fires, a world where angels did tell you to steal things, victories were handed out by saints and deities, and crosses could quite easily appear in the sky. I mean, they do today every St Andrew's Day when someone turns up with a plane causing Instagram feeds to turn blue and white and every conspiracy theorist in the country to start ranting about chemtrails. But you get my point. The stories were real to the people who founded what would become this country.